Yeah, this'll revolution in our time. Everybody's fighting, change coming, yes. That's why it's an acronym for riot. Everybody has a voice, don't you dare stay silent. If you say nothing, you are an accessory to violence. Let these words dry the tears of our people that are crying. We can bring back hope, but not the people that are dying. It's what happens when the people you've oppressed ask for change in the country that they built, but you've ignored and denied. This is Sandra Bland, George Floyd, and every single family. Police brutality is intervened in and destroyed. Couple bad cops can't define all you other boys, so every good cop needs to stand up and make some noise. Black, white, Asian, doesn't matter cause we can't avoid. So let's all come together, join hands, and just get annoyed at people who believe racism makes sense in a country built up minorities, slave work employed. Nobody's born racist, man, it's something you learn, deep rooted in your brain from the day of your birth. I think it's time that we repair all of these bridges we burned and let love out of our hearts onto the cheeks we've turned. Spread love, show love, let's get rid of this curse. Don't wait for anyone to act, man, you go first. 400 years wasted, let's get rid of this hurt, cause that's the only way we'll ever see peace on earth.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Change is what we really need. Cut me open, cut you open, res the color every single human being bleeds. Let's come together, cops, citizens, and in between, and rally for the rights of everybody in humanity. Black, blue, white, green, playing for the same team. Mine, I'm okay, but boy, that doesn't mean I can't dream. Black lives matter, shouldn't anger you or make you scream. All lives matter, cause we aren't treated equally. Remember when we were kids and didn't see color, and when we played in kindergarten and I called you my brother. Then we grew up and they taught us we should hate on each other, even though we went in the same and we all came from our mothers. I hope y'all understand, hate is not a trait, it was learned, man. Equality's the quality we need inside this earth, man. Give and receive is the karma that you earn, man. Yeah, this'll revolution in our time. Everybody's fighting, change coming, yes. That's why it's an acronym for riot. Everybody has a voice, don't you dare stay silent. If you say nothing, you are an accessory to violence. Let these words dry the tears of our people that are crying. We can bring back hope, but not the people that are dying. It's what happens when the people you've oppressed ask for change in the country that they built, but you've ignored and denied. This is Sandra Bland, George Floyd, and every single family. Police brutality is intervened in and destroyed. Couple bad cops can't define all you other boys, so every good cop needs to stand up and make some noise. Black, white, Asian, doesn't matter cause we can't avoid. So let's all come together, join hands, and just get annoyed at people who believe racism makes sense in a country built up minorities, slave work employed. Nobody's born racist, man, it's something you learn, deep rooted in your brain from the day of your birth. I think it's time that we repair all of these bridges we burned and let love out of our hearts onto the cheeks we've turned. Spread love, show love, let's get rid of this curse. Don't wait for anyone to act, man, you go first. 400 years wasted, let's get rid of this hurt, cause that's the only way we'll ever see peace on earth.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Good evening. So nice to see everybody here joining in on what will be an inspirational evening. In over 2 decades of running Camp Manitou, who would have thought our most relevant and necessary fireside topic would have to occur virtually? We have 4 of the most outstanding speakers for you to listen to tonight. This live stream is being recorded so that you can take their invaluable messages and share them with friends and colleagues. Before you hear from our esteemed speakers, we want to take a few minutes to indicate why we are holding this fireside tonight. Firstly, in terms of timing, we purposely waited 6 weeks because the issue of Black systemic racism must not just be a hot topic. Human beings can rise to the occasion when their emotions run high, but have a tendency then to move on to the next issue of the day. Think about how you felt 6 weeks ago and how you feel now. The protests are no longer front and center on the news, and your mindset may have moved on. That's called complacency, and it's natural, but we must push ourselves to not fall into that trap. Let's not assume or rely on our governments to initiate the necessary change. Real change happens as a result of everyday people who mobilize communities, and in turn, that is when our governments and institutions follow that lead and help support that change. At Manitou, every summer you hear the incredible stories of people who took it upon themselves to do something in our world to make it a better place. We all have the opportunity to be difference makers. For us as a community, that means first individually in the name of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, Elijah Maclean, and countless others, taking in all that raw emotion and then figuring out how to bottle that compassion and empathy and then harness it. Real change does not happen with some social media posts. And in fact, our fear is that we fall into the trap thinking that is good enough. So we challenge you after tonight to sit down together as families, as cabins, as friends and alumni, to do just 2 things. 1, reflect inwardly, and 2, take action outwardly. So you can look back a year from now, and more importantly, 10 years from now, and say, proudly, I made a difference.
For us at Manitou, reflecting inwardly means recognizing that most of our population at camp is white. The barrier to participation in many summer camps by people of color are both economic and cultural. This unconscious exclusion we have never properly recognized or truthfully cared enough about. We are not proud of that. We commit publicly that we will take responsibility and commit to addressing these systemic issues together. This is not easy work. Don't think that you will change centuries of persecution and prejudice, whether it be within our Black or Indigenous communities, in weeks or even months, but know that it is the next generation of our campers, our staff, and our camper families that can make a difference. Our last speaker tonight, Orlando Bowen, was a professional football player whose career was ended as a result merely of his skin color. So it's a fitting analogy to say this. We are now at the 5-yard line to make real change. It's little passes and first downs that will get us to center field and eventually to the goal line for a touchdown. This only happens with teamwork. And as one of our speakers told us just a few weeks ago, I just don't want allies, I want teammates. So we can finally create a healthier and better world. Look around and decide who is on your team. The hardest part tonight will not be listening to our 4 new teammates of our Manitou community. That's the easy part. The hard part will be figuring out our next steps after tonight, and that's where we can come in to help you along so we stay focused together for weeks, months, and years with actual action items that we can all work out together. Let's hope as a Manitou community we can find strength, learn from each other, and find other teammates to guide us and to learn with us, as that is how we make our world a better place where everyone can feel respected with equal opportunity for all. As always, we start Friday Night Fireside with our land acknowledgement, so we'll now like to welcome Rach Klein to do so, and also thank her, because after that, we will be presenting a wonderful short video that Rach prepared to start with a bit of history to give some context and perspective to where we are at today. So Rach, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hi Manitou, I'm so excited to be joining all of you tonight for this very special and important fireside. Now, when we're up at Camp Manitou, we begin all of our fireside gatherings by doing a land acknowledgement, and this has been part of Manitou's traditions and protocols for the last few years. We do land acknowledgements as an Indigenous protocol to recognize the history of the land that we're on, the history of colonialism, and also to pay respect and give thanks for the really beautiful space we have. Lake Manitou-Wabing is such a wonderful space that we're so grateful to be on. Right now, we're coming together from all across Turtle Island, from all across the world. So the land acknowledgement that I'm going to be doing is for the Toronto area specifically. That's where myself and a lot of us are calling in from. But no matter where you are, I encourage you to take this time to think about the land that you reside on and maybe take the time to learn about the history of colonialism and how it's affected the area you live in. And you might learn something really new and important. We wish to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River, on whose land we work, live, and play. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. I would also like to acknowledge the current and ongoing actions by the community collective Afro-Indigenous Rising currently happening in Toronto and give solidarity to their peaceful protests. We are grateful to our host today, every day, and always. I also want to remind all of us that while we're not at camp right now, I know that's really, really hard. Our camp is in good hands. It's being cared for by our current caretakers and by the past caretakers of the land, and it will continue to be looked after in the many, many years to come. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and continuing to do the work of learning and unlearning as we work towards a better, more inclusive, more beautiful future. And that's something we can only do together. Thank you. And now we have a video presentation that's going to give you a little bit of information on some racial justice movements in the United States and the current movements and civil rights actions that are taking place right now, and why it's so important that we all use our voice to stand up against injustice and for what we know is right. Thank you so much and have a great night.
As a child, Rosa was exposed to the realities of segregation. She walked to school daily because the elementary school bus system prohibited black students from riding.
History is peculiar. It places gifted and talented women and men in situations where they must make a choice. The choice she made was on the afternoon of the 1st of December, 1955, on a bus as she was going home from her seamstress job in a department store in Montgomery, Alabama.
Rosa, along with 3 other black passengers, were told to give up their seats to a white male passenger. She refused and was arrested. An all-day bus boycott was organized on the day of Rosa's trial.
She was a role model for courage in the face of racial injustice.
Standing up there and the people started running.
We are here and we are standing before the forces of power in the state of Alabama saying we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
Rach, thank you so much for doing that video as usual on your own time and putting your heart and soul into that. That was really inspirational and gave us a great perspective. I'd now like to welcome Naya Forrester to say a few words. Naya has been a camper at Manitou for 3 summers, and we've been so fortunate to get to know her over this time. It was Naya that became the spark for deciding to hold this evening, because she reached out to us to discuss how Manitou could educate its community at a deeper level about the challenges faced every single day, along with the history of systemic racism, and also generally how Black people are treated here in Toronto, and even in our wonderful community of Manitou. Manitou is like most communities out there that think we are doing our best, but we still have to do better, and we intend to. She told me actually to watch an incredible documentary called 13th, and it's things like this, hearing from our youth of how to educate ourselves, that allows us to become better people. She inspires us all. Thank you, Naya, for proving once again that it just takes one person to be the impetus for helping the world.
Hi everybody, my name is Naya, and as Mark said, I've been going to Manitou for 3 years. So I'd just like to talk a bit about why I contacted the camp, and I'd also like to share some experiences that I've had. So I contacted the camp after seeing the Instagram story of a boy that goes to Manitou that said, the George Floyd thing has nothing to do with race, what's with these protests? So after seeing that, I realized that there may be a lot of kids who don't understand what these protests are about, or don't understand that George Floyd was killed because he was a Black man. It made me think that because Manitou has such a large platform, that they could use that platform to educate a lot of people. So I'm very grateful that they're doing this. I just like to share some experiences that I've had that I don't think were okay. So when I was 5, my kindergarten class had walking buddies, and you had to hold your walking buddy's hand, and my walking buddy refused to hold my hand. And when I asked him why, he said, because you're Black. When I was 7, I went to a predominantly white school, and I didn't make any real friends till midwinter. And one day I asked my mom if no one wanted to be my friend because I was Black. When I was 12 and it was my second year at Manitou, I saw 3 boys singing the N-word part to the song Freaky Friday, and I didn't say anything. I told them to shut up, but I didn't tell them why they shouldn't say that. I didn't tell an adult, I didn't tell a counselor, I didn't really tell anyone, and I regret that. I didn't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Last year, when I was 13, a girl in my cabin said the N-word, and I feel as though she said it to provoke me, to get a reaction out of me, and she did. I cried. She didn't call me the N-word, but she did say it, and it hurt. It made me very uncomfortable. And in hindsight, something that hurts a bit as well is the fact that no one really did anything. No one told adults. No one did anything. So, that I regret not saying anything as well. I've had a lot of good experiences. I've had great experiences at Manitou, and I don't want to take away from that, but I have had some bad experiences, and I'm hoping that just by hearing what I have to say and hearing how those things made me feel, it'll allow some of you to understand that the reason you shouldn't say stuff like that, the reason why you shouldn't say the N-word is because it hurts people. It makes people very uncomfortable, and then I don't say anything because I didn't want to make people uncomfortable, which that's not okay. And I hope that after hearing what I have to say and after hearing what the other speakers have to say, you will feel motivated to further educate yourselves on racism and white supremacy and white privilege, and you'll learn to become anti-racist, not just not racist. And if you are already allies, then you can become the best allies that you can be. So thank you for listening to what I have to say, and I would now like to introduce a very good friend of my mom's. I've known him since I was a baby. He's a great guy. He was the first person to come to mind when me and my mom were discussing who we would suggest to speak today. I'm so grateful that he's doing this, and without further ado, I'd now like to introduce Jama. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Naya, for that great introduction. It's great to be connected with you again, and I'm excited to do this fireside talk tonight for all of you. I think it's interesting that we come together during these times and that we join together in many different shapes and forms, be it virtually or otherwise, to connect with people, because that's really what this is about, and that's what's special about what we're doing as a society today. For Naya specifically, I really want to thank you. Those of you who may not know, she actually was my flower girl many, many years ago, so it's wonderful to see her grow up into such a tremendous young lady, and just wish her all the best in the future and her continued success at camp, and obviously in life as well. So thank you so much for the introduction, and really cool to connect with you and say hi to your mom for me. I want to share 3 things to this group, and I think as we move down this road here of discussing race and discussing sort of culture and discussing how they intermix, there's 3 areas for me that are really critically important. I'm a basketball coach, so I work in the area of sport all the time, but these 3 things override sport. And the first is compassion for self, and understanding of self. And that to me is your real starting point to dealing with this sort of anti-black racism, to dealing with how you figure out your own place in society. The second one I really want to talk about and sort of just dive into is community, right? I think community is really important. And what are the community that we have? How do we grow in our community? And what is our own beloved community? And how does that become a place where we can affect some change? And for all of you, it's your camp community. And that's, I think, why we're here today. And then thirdly is choice. And what are the choices that we all have? I think we have a tremendous ability to make choices each and every day. I talk to my players a lot about the choices they have on the basketball court, but also in life. We talk about winning our moments, and we have 10,000 moments a day to win. And the more of those moments we win, the better chance we will be champions. And making choices, and especially as it relates to this topic, are critically important and really special. But I think to help out, I want to talk about me just to start, to give you some context. I think how we see people on a screen and visually what they represent and where they come from are sometimes different or sometimes the same or sometimes need to be sorted out in our minds. So I have a black Swazi father from Southern Africa, country of Swaziland. It's now called Eswatini, for those that know their African history, and a white Canadian mother. And they're my incredible parents who have sort of born me, and I'm sort of smack dab in the middle of both of them. So I've had a life of living in both different worlds, with both different cultures and both different racial identities. I grew up in the annex in downtown Toronto in a middle class to upper class upbringing, and I know that shaped a lot of my sense of who I am, and that shaped a lot of the opportunities that I've had, and that's been part of my reality of who I am as a person. I'm currently married to a Korean Canadian, and we have the most beautiful children who are sort of a mixture of all of that. So race has always been something that's been hard to pinpoint, but also has lots of complexities and lots of diversities, but is grounded in love and grounded in compassion and grounded in people. And I think for me, who spends a lot of time coaching, a lot of time in sport, a lot of time in what can be polarized worlds of sort of the right call or the wrong call by the referee, although it seems like they get them wrong most of the time, that understanding society is different, and that there's lots of gray and there's lots of challenge. And I think a call like today and a talk like today is about addressing some of those challenges and figuring out the best way for each of us to move forward. So my first point was about compassion. And I think compassion, again, starts with yourself. And as the sort of horrendous acts that occurred to George Floyd and many others over the course of the summer and the course of our past history occurred, it always gives me a frame of reference for figuring out who I am within this. What is my own personal identity as it relates to race? And as I began at the beginning, it's not some simple one. Coach Adrian Griffin, he's an assistant coach for the Toronto Raptors. And when all this happened, we all got on a conference call, the entire team and the entire coaching staff. And he made probably one of the most poignant points. And we were sort of seeking for how do we respond as the Toronto Raptors? And he made a point that listen, we need to look in the mirror first. We need to figure out our own place in this, our own responsibility, our own baggage, our own contributions first, And before you do that, there's no place for any sort of outward statement or anything larger than that. And I thought it was just a really smart way to think about this. And I think it's a great starting point for each of us. Compassion then becomes, once you understand yourself, then you need to have compassion for those around you and understand that, listen, we all have different roles and different parts in this thing. But the only way forward is to compassionately love the person within that. So it's not become a white versus black thing by any stretch or any way in the imagination. It becomes a people supporting people thing, and we all just come from different places and have different realities that have got us there, and some more difficult than others. For me, who is a professional basketball coach and grown up in the city for many, many years, again, I have this privilege that I know of because of the way I was raised, where I was raised. But I also know that when I leave a store without having purchased anything, that I'm aware that the store managers or the clerks might be looking at me to say, does he have anything? And that's something that I just have to deal with and figure out. And that's one of many examples that because of the way I look and the face that you're seeing on your screen, the way it looks, that certain things come with that. There's certain biases that are present because of that, and the ways that society does react to you because of the way you look, that have nothing to do with who you are. Once we've have compassion for ourselves and compassion for those around us, the next part is community. And community to me starts small, and it starts with your immediate family, your brothers and your sisters, your parents, your immediate circle, your friends. And I think finding a way to live in what I like to call, and bell hooks coined this phrase of a beloved community, that becomes really critically important. And a beloved community is one that shares and recognizes diversity and difference and celebrates it, but also challenges each other and finds a way to move things forward. We can't let it sit here. We can't let it be here. There's been too much challenge. There's been too much hardship. This fight has gone on for too long. And there's momentum now. And I think the starting point, for me at least, and for many of you, will be what can you do in your own immediate community before you sort of think about this large, broad sense of how do I affect change and how do I make the world a better place? What do I do in my family? What do I do with my friends? And those are some really critical, important choices you need to make. And to me, they begin with communication. And it's really simple. I was on a talk the other day, and the speaker had an amazing thought to me, which I never even really processed, was that, listen, education and listening are active steps towards change. Those are action items. Those are actionable things that you can do to listen, right? And to learn and to understand that based on who you are, gives you a perspective on the world. And if you've never thought about race, if you've never had to worry about leaving a Shoppers Drug Mart without buying anything and wondering if some people are looking at you or they're going to stop you, then that is your reality, and that reality is fine, right? But that reality is also different than other people's realities. For myself as a coach, my immediate community is my basketball team, and we've had some dialogue and discussion, and we have players that grew up in Wisconsin or Ohio with one or two black folks in their high schools and mainly white people around them, and we've had people from the States or from Toronto who have had a very different sort of diverse upbringing. But the conversations and the dialogue of us and our team are so powerful, and they're so incredible, and I think we each learn from each other at all times, and that learning process begins this sense of understanding how race does impact people and how systemic racism operates and the different systems through which it operates and the ways that it creates advantage or disadvantage for those different people in our world. And I think as you look at your immediate community and your camp, I challenge you over this next stretch of time and over the next year and you all love your camp, and that's so great, right? But how can your camp be better? And that's the same question I asked about my basketball team. How can it be better? How can we celebrate diversity more? How can we be more inclusive? How can we sort of, fight any of the sort of systemic racism and natural biases that many of us have and start to shift those and flip those and not let them permeate our society? So I challenge you all to make a choice and to use this fireside chat as a beginning part of your choices, because you each have a choice to make, and you have a choice to recognize what's happening, to engage in the discussion. Listen, I don't have a choice when I walk out of a store to engage in how my race makes me identified, right? Some people do have a choice to not engage in anything to do with race or racialized thought or understanding the differences that happen in this world. Choose to start a conversation and continue a conversation, because this can't just be a moment. It has to be a movement. And for it to be a movement, we need everybody to continue the dialogue, to continue figuring out themselves, to continue figuring out their immediate community, and then to make some active choices that affect change. It's really important that we take this challenge on, because the world is too important, and people are too important. We're all too special to let continued hatred and let continued attitudes of bigotry and racism impact our lives. We are special, amazing people that need to be loved and celebrated, and your camp does a good job at that, and you can continue to do better, and this is your beginning point of that. And next summer or whenever you're able to get together in person, please love on each other. Please discuss these things. Please find a way to move the message forward. We have a lot of great speakers who are going to continue along this fireside chat, and they have amazing wisdom as well. So I want you to enjoy today, but also make today a challenge that it can't just be about today. It's got to be about tomorrow, the next day, and more importantly, the months and years moving forward, because we have momentum and there is a moment that we're in, but it needs to become a movement. So thank you all so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of this, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Jama, for your powerful message. Please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Chika Stacy Oriuwa. When Dr. Oriuwa started medical school at the U of T 4 years ago, she was the only Black person in a class of 259 students. Dr. Oriuwa graduated this June as the valedictorian of her year. As part of her valedictorian address, Dr. Oriuwa spoke about becoming the ambassador of the Black Student Application at the U of T, an initiative developed by faculty in partnership with the Black community in response to the chronically low number of Black students accepted into the program. This took courage. Dr. Oriuwa is a spoken word artist who has used her voice to advocate for the racism she has encountered throughout her life. The advocacy that Chika had spoken of before was now even more challenging in an academic environment. Through this program, Dr. Oriuwa's work has resulted in 24 Black medical students being admitted to the university's medical program for the class of 2024, which is the largest group in Canadian history. We are honored to have Dr. Oriuwa with us tonight to tell us her story and what we can do to make real change.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Chika Stacy Oriuwa. I want to thank you firstly to Mark and the entire Camp Manitou team for inviting me to speak with all of you today. My presentation is entitled Thriving at the Intersections, Being a Black Woman in Medicine. So some of the first things that I want to talk about are the invisible challenges that were brought to light. So some of the things that you're going to see on the screen are real things that were said to me either by peers, by other staff physicians, by patients, or by people on the internet who heard about my story. So some of the things that were mentioned were, do they make it easier for you to get in here? Do we really need a medical class that is reflective of the population? You're not a doctor, and anyone who is not a doctor needs to leave the room. I wouldn't let her treat me or give me medicine. Chika, you're kidding me, right? That can't actually be your real name. You were the only one that tried, the best of a bad situation. You really needn't to be so sensitive. This was in response to me raising a concern around a racist issue. Excuse me, you forgot to clean the vomit off the floor. That was said to me during one of my emergency room rotations. That's your problem, not mine. Your people aren't as smart, and that's why they're not in medicine. And I would never want you to provide medical care to my children. Just for context, these were some of the things that were said to me over the course of the last 4 years. So with regards to my background, this is a photo of me. I was 4 years old at this time, and that was around the time when I realized I wanted to be a doctor. That's a photo of myself and my mom. So both of my parents are immigrants, and they came here from Nigeria in the 1980s. And they had me and my 3 other siblings, which you can see here. And at this time, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and yet I never had actually seen any Black individuals who were practicing medicine in Canada. And I grew up in Brampton, Ontario, which at the time was somewhat diverse, but certainly I still did not see anyone that looked like me in medicine. Moving forward, this is a photo of myself at my high school graduation. So I attended St. Thomas Aquinas Secondary School, and I graduated as valedictorian of my class in 2011. And this was kind of the earliest infancy of my love for advocacy. I really started to notice that I had this passion for public speaking, and I had a passion for wanting to speak up about things that I thought were important, such as protecting vulnerable populations. And next is my undergraduate experience. So I attended university at McMaster University in the Bachelor of Health Sciences honors program. I was the only Black student in my class at this stage. And that's when I really started to clue into the true lack of diversity in higher levels of academia. This is also the point at which I started to experience more racial microaggressions. And what that means is that there are sometimes encounters that you have with individuals where it might not be really obvious or explicit racism, but it's more subtle. There might be more backhanded comments. Sometimes you might not even realize that it was a racist comment until you kind of step away from it and you think back and reflect and say, you know, that was actually very hurtful. So that's when I really started to kind of recognize and pick up on these experiences. This is a photo of myself and my friends in my undergraduate class. So this is just after finishing my second year of university. And we were all going past the border into the US because we were going on a shopping trip. And as you can see, I'm the only Black individual in the car. And as we were trying to get past the Border Patrol officer stopped and asked, what is everyone in this car doing? How do you guys know each other? And we said that we were all in the health sciences program and that we all had aspirations of becoming doctors. And that's kind of what we were in school for. And he said, even you, leaned into the car and said, even you, towards me. And then there was this back and forth exchange between me and this authority figure who was accusing me of lying. I put here a quote from one of the articles that I wrote a few years ago for Flair magazine, where I state, it was clear what the officer was trying to imply. A Black female physician is impossible. Now fast forward a few years to my first year of medical school at the University of Toronto. Incoming class of 2016, I realized on my very first day that I was the only Black medical student. You can imagine, after having spent several years in my undergrad being the only Black student and encountering discrimination, that I was eagerly looking forward to attending not only the biggest medical school, but a medical school that was situated in the most diverse and culturally rich part of the country and even, the world, some would say. Attending the University of Toronto Medical School and then realizing that I was the only Black student was very disheartening for me at that time. And not only did I notice that, but I also came to realize that there weren't many Black doctors who were actually teaching us. There were very few. And there was also this lack of diversity in the medical education. So the actual things that we were learning about, the different diseases, the different presentations, that was not exactly spread across and not very inclusive or diverse of other cultures. On my very first day of medical school, someone had said to me, did they make it easier for you to get into medical school? And so I started to have these fears around needing to prove my merit, needed to show other people that I got in just the same way that anyone else got in and that I was worthy of being there. There was certainly this pursuit of perfectionism because of the fears that I had being the only Black person in that space. And then there's also the vulnerability of hearing stories from other Black female physicians who said that, as you go and progress further on in your training, the racism kind of ramps up and it gets worse. So that was definitely a difficult thing for me to deal with. In my first year of medical school, I was actually asked to be the public ambassador of the Black Student Application Program. And this was an effort to increase the number of Black medical students actually applying to and being a part of the medical school at U of T. And just for clarity, this is a stream that is the exact same entry criteria for every single applicant. And its main focus is to minimize the implicit bias. And what that means is to minimize the forces and structures that might make it not exactly an equal process for every single applicant, trying to minimize that by incorporating more Black individuals into the file review and into the interviewing process. Initially, I was getting warnings not to take on this role because I was told that institutions don't like people that challenge the status quo. As you can see, however, I decided to move forward with it because for me, my conviction was that I thought it was so important for me to use the privilege that I had being in medical school and being in that position to speak authentically to my experiences in order to make it easier for future generations of Black doctors to come in and actually thrive and create a more safe environment. And so I decided to do that. What was beautiful about that was that I had further opportunities to be able to engage in community engagement, particularly with the Ontario Black Youth Action Plan, and actually getting to collaborate with the provincial government on legislature to be able to support Black communities. And that was incredibly exciting at that time. And I also had further leadership opportunities to be the president of the Black Medical Students Association, as well as founding the Black Interprofessional Students Association of U of T. And then in my second year of medicine, I also wrote an article called In My Black Coat, I Am More, in my white coat, I am more Black than ever, my apologies. And that was published in Flair magazine in 2018 for Black History Month. This was an incredible opportunity for me to be able to speak authentically to my narrative and to encourage discourse around diversity in medicine. However, with that came an onslaught of unfortunate racist vitriol online. So there are people who were saying things like, go back to Africa, and, Black people aren't as intelligent. And some of the quotes that I had mentioned earlier on, those were stated by some anonymous individuals online. And what really kept me going was having allies near and far who would reach out to me and say, we see what you're doing. We honor and respect the work that you're doing. You really are giving voice to so many Black individuals who are in similar positions to yourself. And this led to further platforms for advocacy. Certainly, one of my most proud achievements was giving the International Women's Day keynote address at Women's College Hospital in 2018 and getting to engage with further media opportunities, TV, news, radio, to discuss the importance of diversity in medicine. And then in my third year of medicine, when I started clerkship and was in the hospital all of the time, I really had to kind of make the decision, is this something I wanted to keep doing, my advocacy, or is it something that I kind of had to take a step back? And what I realized was that advocacy for me was a form of self-preservation. So being the only Black person in my medical school at times felt incredibly isolating and othering. And I found that being able to speak up about my experiences was incredibly empowering. And that was how I was able to process and come to terms with a lot of the discrimination that I faced. And so that's why I say it's a form of self-preservation, because that's how I believe I got through some of the darkest and hardest parts of medical school. And lastly, in my fourth year of medicine, I was fortunate to be selected by my graduating class at the University of Toronto to be the valedictorian and represent our class and provide a keynote speech. One of the things that I really drew on while thinking about the speech was the Michelle Obama documentary called Becoming. And she states, if you don't work to define yourself, someone else will do it quickly and inaccurately. And I really found that defining myself was such an important part of my journey, because there have been so many times in which other individuals would try and write my story or define who I was. For example, being told by a patient to leave the room because I didn't look like a doctor. So really, the importance of being able to define who you are and to have your internal convictions guide you is such an important thing that I tried to impart upon my class. And so, as I stated here, I defined myself in the last 4 years through understanding and hopefully demonstrating that there is a power in narrative and in vulnerability. With a community to stand behind you and a mentor to guide you, you can take the risks that might move mountains. And so lastly, I want to leave you with a prescription for advocacy. So some of the most important things that we can think about as advocates, especially during this tumultuous time and this time of a lot of political and civil unrest, where we're seeing a lot of police brutality, we're seeing a lot of anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism that's always been there, but it's really coming more to the public conscience. And so one of the things I want to leave for you is a prescription of how is it that you can engage in advocacy. So some of the most important things is, look around the table. If you're at a table where important decisions are made, where leadership exists, look around the table and see who is not represented. Take it one step further and ask why. And even one step further and ask, what is it that you can do about that? And the other thing you can do is to validate. So if someone tells you about their lived experience with discrimination, the easiest thing you can do is say, I hear you. I'm sorry that you are experiencing that. What can I do to help? Just to validate their lived experience. The next thing you can do is learn and unlearn. So there are so many resources out there where you can educate yourself about anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, inclusive practices. Unlearning means being able to be reflexive and look inside yourself, look inside some of your patterns and behaviors that might be reinforcing some discriminatory practices. And lastly, showing up and speaking up. So once you've acquired all of this knowledge, really being able to speak up about the things and the injustices that you notice are not right, and showing up when it counts. And lastly, for those of us who engage in advocacy, it's important to remember our why moments. And what this means is that, when it gets really hard, when I encounter these racist comments online, when I see and hear these really horrible things that are directed towards me, it's important for me to remember why it is that I do this work. And one of the most important things that I remember is having an experience where I had a young Black woman who was also from Brampton, and I went to her high school, and she talked to me. She said, oh my gosh, you're in medicine and you came from Brampton too, and you look like me and you're a Black woman. And that for her was such a defining moment, to see herself reflected in a space where she never thought people like us could exist. and, ultimately connecting with other medical students, connecting with other people who are doing this work. And ultimately for me, being a doctor and seeing patients who for the first time have never seen a Black doctor, but are so proud and sometimes even tear up when they see me, because it's so validating for them to see themselves reflected in that field. So these are my why moments. And I want to challenge all of you to think about, what are some of your why moments when you engage in advocacy? Yeah, that's my presentation. I want to thank all of you for being so attentive, and to Mark and the entire Camp Manitou collective for having me speak today. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Oriuwa, again, for sharing your inspiring story. There are many lessons to take away from your presentation, and we are simply in awe of the impact you have made. We are so grateful you were able to join us. Our next speaker is the incomparable Anthony Maclean. Anthony is a man of many talents and actually joined us in person last year at our Manitou Fireside, where he shared his life story, moved us all with his incredible spoken word performance, and of course, his one-of-a-kind energy. Since last summer, he's moved to Los Angeles, California with his family, which gives him an important perspective on the issues we are confronting this evening. We are thrilled our friend is back with us again to share his thoughts and, of course, to perform some powerful spoken word for us all. Without further ado, please welcome Anthony Maclean.
What up, Camp Manitou? Anthony Maclean coming at you. I'm so glad I get to be part of this virtual fireside chat. What I want to do today is I want to share a spoken word piece that I wrote. And I wrote it about something that happened to me when I was in grade 6. Hey, funny side note, I'm living in California now with my family, and they don't say grade 6 here, they say 6th grade. It's the little things you gotta get used to. But anyway, I wrote this piece about something that happened to me in 6th grade. What I want you to listen for in this piece is something we call microaggressions, all right? So microaggressions, this is any indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a particular group. So that could be gender, race, religion, experiencing discrimination in a way that is subtle, indirect, or unintentional. So listen to this piece and you see if you can pick up on the microaggressions that I went through in grade 6 or the 6th grade. It goes like this. I remember 6th grade, I was talking in class and somebody walked up and asked, he said, "Hey, why do you talk like a white guy?" I was confused. I was like, "Wow, what do you mean? How do I talk?" He told me that I sounded too smart, and that's not a good thing. He said, "You're black. It's supposed to be a hood thing. Ghetto life." Tried to give me a pound. I didn't get it right. Slapped my high five into his fist, and he said it twice. He called me Oreo. It's black, but the center's white. That was the day I cracked. Decided right there that I'd be more black. So I leaned when I walked. Put slang in my talk. I changed who I was. I tried to play the part, but I played myself. Sometimes it's real hard to stay yourself, and that's how it is, and that's how it's gonna be. I said, that's how it is, and that's how it's gonna be. And yeah, that's how it is, and that's how it's gonna be, unless we change it, because we can change it. Thank you, thank you. Hopefully, there's applause happening all across living rooms in Canada and all around the world right now, because I know Camp Manitou has campers from all over. I do hope you enjoyed the piece. Now, did you pick up any of those subtle microaggressions? Because they were there, man. I've been through them my whole life. Why do you talk like a white guy? You sound smart. You're supposed to sound like you're from the hood. I've heard people say things to friends of mine, black women, and they'll say things like, "You know, for a black girl, you're really nice." And it's so hurtful because it means that this person sees the entire black community in one way. I just think it's so painful to look at an entire community and think that we are all like this. It hurts so much. Hey, I'm just being real with you. Racism, it hurts. It's a poison. And we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of it. And that's why the last line of that piece is, that's how it is and that's how it's going to be unless we change it. And we can change it. Let me close my time with you by showing you a picture that I took of my family over the Christmas holidays, all right? This is me and my family over the Christmas holidays. My wife, Susie, said, let's do this pajama thing. So she went and bought us these matching pajamas. And that's my daughter, Ariwa, right there. That's my son, Joshua. And we did that over the Christmas holidays. And then, right after that picture, we jumped in a car and we drove across the country and we moved to California. And we actually drove, long story, we had to fly from Toronto to Miami because we were staying there for a while and our car was there. And then we drove, get this, from Miami, Florida, we drove all the way to Los Angeles, California. It was a 5-day trip. And let me tell you, Texas is forever long. Like you just drive and drive and you never get out of Texas. But it was a great trip. We arrived in California January 9th. And we've been living here ever since. We arrived in January, got the kids in school, and then in March, the world shut down because of the coronavirus. And I kept telling the kids, don't worry, it's gonna get back to normal, it's gonna get back to normal. In March, we're at home and sheltering in place. In April, we're at home, sheltering in place. And then in May, the protests started when we saw the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and people were protesting. And I remember being at home and watching the protests and the riots too, which were a real shame. Because a lot of people that were protesting were doing it peacefully and trying to raise awareness for the cause. And then some people were co-opting that movement and just saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of people on the street, I can go get away with some stuff now. Anyway, I saw the protests, and here in LA, they put a curfew on that you couldn't leave your house after 8 p.m. And it felt weird not being allowed to leave your house. So one day after dinner, I brought my kids for ice cream and we walked across the street and we went to Menchie's. And we love Menchie's because, you know, you get to put all the toppings on and all that stuff. But as we walked into the parking lot, the whole parking lot was empty. And I checked the time, it was 6:30 p.m. and it was like a ghost town. There was no one on the streets. And we went to the Menchie's and it was closed at 6:30 p.m. and everything was closed. We were the only ones out. I checked my phone and I found out the curfew was now 5 p.m. You can't be outside your house after 5 p.m. or you can be arrested. So we had to go back home, and it was kind of scary. It kind of felt weird being told you can't leave your house. And I told my kids again, it's okay. Things are gonna go back to normal. And then I realized something. I realized I don't want things to go back to normal. Because normal is racism. Normal is police brutality, which isn't confronted. Normal is microaggressions are just a part of life. Normal is I'm stigmatized. You're black, that means you fit in this box. And I don't want my kids to grow up in that kind of world. I don't want to go back to normal. And then I watched another protest, and I watched people protesting peacefully, and I realized, wait a minute, I've seen images like this before, and that's when Martin Luther King was marching in the 60s fighting for civil rights. And I've heard interviews of people that said, I marched with Martin Luther King, and I remember thinking, I wasn't alive then, but man, how cool would it be if I could have marched with Martin Luther King? And I realized, wait a minute, right now, this is a chance the world is coming together saying, hey, let's march, let's peacefully protest against systemic racism. And I decided we are not going to sit at home sheltering in place, waiting for things to go back to normal. We are going to change it because we can change it. And so I brought my family to a peaceful protest. And this is us right here holding up our signs. This is my son and I. Notice we wore the mask, did our best, you know, even some social distancing. This is my daughter. This is my wife right here. And we went to this protest, and it was so powerful. It was so beautiful. And the thing I loved the most about this protest is that all the people around us, they were black, they were white. We saw signs, Jews for Black Lives Matter, Filipinx for Black Lives Matter, Latinx for Black Lives, like literally Pacific Islanders for Black Lives Matter. It was amazing. It was every race you can imagine. It was old, it was young, it was rich, it was poor. And everyone was united, saying, hey, this is wrong. This is an injustice, and we can change it. I gotta be honest with you. One of the things I noticed is how many young people were in those streets saying, we can change it. I left that peaceful protest and I felt so empowered. My kids felt so empowered when they looked to their right and their left and they saw white people and Chinese people and Korean people. But we felt so empowered because the world has come together to say, hey, this matters and we can make a difference. So as I close my time with you, I want to encourage you. Now is a time that your kids and your grandkids, if you have kids, are going to ask you about, yo, what did you do that year of 2020 when the world went upside down? What did you do? And you can either say, well, I read books and I got educated because I didn't understand what systemic racism was. So I watched films and I listened to podcasts and I did my best to educate myself. And then my family and I, we actually donated to a cause that we believed in. And we started sharing stuff on social media, and that's how I engaged in the movement. Or you can say, I didn't do anything because I didn't take the time to educate myself, and I didn't do anything because I didn't want to say the wrong thing, so I didn't say anything at all. Thanks for your time.
Wow, thanks, Anthony. It is once again such a pleasure and an honor to have you as part of our Manitou Fireside community. Well done. Now we are welcoming our final speaker of the night, Orlando Bowen. While a few short years ago, waiting for friends in the parking lot of a Mississauga nightclub, on the way to toasting the new contract he just signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League, Bowen was approached by two men who asked him if he had drugs to sell. He brushed them off. They persisted. The men, it turned out, were plainclothes officers from the Peel Regional Police Service. An altercation ensued, and one frightening instant, a night that was supposed to be a celebration of Bowen's professional success in pro football, turned into a fight for his survival. But Bowen's brush with the corrupt came with consequence. The concussion he suffered, which he says still occasionally gives him trouble with his balance, led to his retirement from the CFL. However, tonight we are thrilled to welcome Orlando into our fireside and share his story for us to hear. Welcome to Manitou's Fireside community. Thanks, Orlando.
Camp Manitou, let's go, baby. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, if you have food, I want you to put it down. If you got someone that you're holding in your arms, put them down as well. When I say one voice with passion and energy, I want you to say one team. One voice. One voice. That's what it takes. My name is Orlando Bowen. I have the honor of being able to engage you. I wish I could see you right now. I wish we had this time like live and in person so I could actually reach out and high five you or air high five you as we go through this very interesting time. Right now, here's what's up. Camp Manitou, we're going to have a conversation where I'm going to be sharing some things about my journey, also our collective journey, and then throughout there'll be some challenges to see things differently, challenge you to do things differently, challenge you to show up differently. One voice, one team. Every day is game day. Every day that you wake up is an opportunity to pour out into somebody else's life. So when I say, what day is it? The answer is game day. What day is it? Every day we have a chance to do something that makes a difference. Today is another one of those days. It's an opportunity for us to connect and to have conversation, but with the understanding that we're going to do something that makes a difference in somebody else's life. So understand that this game called life is a journey. I was born in Montego Bay, Jamaica, came to Canada when I was young. I was 3 years old, grew up in inner city Toronto in public housing, moved to the suburbs for high school, started playing organized sports, played football, basketball, track, soccer. I got a football scholarship to Northern Illinois, home of the Huskies. And while I was there, I played hard and studied hard, graduated twice, bachelor's in marketing, master's in IT. But there was something that was missing. You know, when I was younger, My parents were working really hard, so I ended up spending a lot more time at my grandparents' house. My grandmother used to always encourage us, do amazing things, work hard, and set the tone, right? And raise the bar, but as you're raising the bar, make sure that you raise the floor too, so that more people could reach the bar. Because it's not about you achieving, it's about us as a collective achieving. So when I finished at Northern Illinois University academically, and I was working in downtown Chicago, and I was making really good money, and I was like, woohoo, I'm doing it. The thing that was missing for me was the whole notion of service. The whole notion of giving back, because it's not about me, it's about us, the collective. The Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League called and said, are you still interested in playing football? And I was like, if I made the team, could I actually do stuff in community? Like, could I serve? Could I help out? Could I, talk to young people, give them perspective? And they said, if you make this team, absolutely. The reason why the thought of making a difference was such a driving force for me was because of some of the things that I saw in Chicago and some of the things that the young people, amazing, talented, brilliant young people, were getting sidetracked and distracted because they didn't believe was even a possibility for them. So my whole dream was, to help them understand what's possible. The thought was, how can we allow them to see the brilliance that they have? Because if they knew that they had those gifts, they wouldn't do that. So that became the goal. So when the Argos called, I was like, all right, this might be my chance to pour into community from the platform of a professional athlete. So I came back to Canada, immediately got involved in service, was working with sick youth and homeless youth and newcomer refugee families, training police in racial sensitivity and working with Crime Stoppers. I was trying to figure out how I could best serve, how I could give back, how I could be different. I was trying to find my own star in this whole process, right? I played for 4 seasons. I signed a contract with the Hamilton Tiger Cats for my 4th season. Then was going into my 5th year as a professional athlete, still serving, still speaking, and just feeling like, you know what? This is what fills my heart. This is what allows me to feel like I'm actually contributing and making a difference. And I had all these ideas, these goals, these dreams of what was possible. I signed a contract extension with the Hamilton Tiger Cats and then proceeded to go out to celebrate with my teammates. I got to the location that we're going to meet up at, and as I'm waiting on my teammates, I see 2 guys walking towards me. One guy says, hey man, what you got? Got any drugs? I'm looking at him like, he must not understand why no, I don't. And I happened to be on the phone at the time. I went back to my phone call, so I'm on the phone. These 2 gentlemen had just interacted with me. Now, one guy stopped at the rear of my vehicle. The other guy kept walking. The guy that stopped says, are you sure? And I looked at him and I was about to respond, but then I remembered that I had seen 2 guys. And now I was only seeing 1, so I looked to see where the other guy was and noticed that he was standing in my blind spot. So I took a step back so I could see both of them at the same time. I said, what's going on? Without many words being exchanged, these guys are both armed with guns, and they grabbed me and started to try to wrestle me down to the ground, and they started to beat me and beat me and beat me until the skin on my head split. And I was face down on the pavement, and I could feel the blood running out of my face, and I could feel my body beaten. And all I could think was, God, don't let me die like this. I got so much in me to give, not like this. That assault ended my football career. And what was even more challenging was that the assault happened at the hands of 2 corrupt undercover police officers who happened to work for the police force that I was a spokesperson of. So I was their face in the community. So one thing I knew was that there were a lot of amazing officers that I had served with. So I knew that one of those amazing officers, when they learned about this, would stand up and say, hey, we made a mistake, or hey, we need to fix this. They would say something because that's just who they are. And how I've known them to show up in terms of being difference makers and all about community. But the reality was they were afraid. So they said nothing. And when the officers realized that I was their spokesperson, I was scheduled to be the keynote speaker at this event called the Race Against Racism, a huge cover-up began. I was taken to jail and I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone. While I was in the jail cell, it was very surreal because, even though I was asking for my phone call, I kept being denied my phone call. But I heard them releasing other people, so I figured, okay, maybe they're gonna come and just release me. But when no one was stopping at my jail cell, I thought, well, excuse me, when do I get to go home? And I remember the officer looking at me and saying, home? You're not going home. you have a bail hearing. And I remember thinking, a bail hearing for what? And he looked at me and said, don't you know what you've been charged with? You've been charged with assaulting a police officer, 2 counts, and possession of a controlled substance. I looked at him, my mouth dropped. I said, what are you talking about? And he looked at me and he said, do you know what you look like, man? You look like a piece of S-H-I-T, you effing a-hole. And then he walked off. The charges were for real. And the charges challenged everything I had come back to Canada to do. In terms of the service, in terms of wanting to make a difference. Understand that it's a journey. Sitting in court and having to deal with the officers, lie on the stand, and look at the judge and look at me and say, Your Honor, he's 6'2", 235 pounds, and he's actually trained to hurt people. In my 17 years on this force, I've never been so afraid for my life or my partner's life, and have them look at me and smile. I thought back to the words of my grandmother who used to say, hurt people, hurt other people. And all I could think was, what kind of pain must he have been through to allow him the capacity to do that to another human being when he knows the truth? How could someone do that? I was baffled by that. And I thought, how do we get to a place in our society where that's possible? When I was watching the murder of George Floyd, all I could think was, how do we get to a place where that is possible? How do we get to a place where in broad daylight, a major city, with people all around, with cameras rolling, that someone could be murdered on the street and folks aren't willing to take action? That's deep for me. We've got a lot of work to do. But Camp Manitou family, we're up to it, right? Because it's not about us as individuals, it's about us as a collective. One voice, one team. Reflect. To me, it's about reflection. It's about really reflecting on understanding what you're able to contribute. Not what is due to you, not what is owed to you, but what can you actually do with the time, the energy, the gifts, the talents that you have that can move the needle for possibilities for somebody else. Because I'm telling you, if there were ever a time for us to show up and be game changers in the lives of others, today is the day, and now is the time. Going back to the case, what some may consider a strange turn of events, we got about 6 weeks before we were supposed to get the verdict, and the arresting officer was himself arrested by the RCMP for trafficking cocaine. They found a lot of cocaine at his house. Convicted and sentenced to go to jail for 5 years and 8 months. In the interim, I was acquitted. But when he was sentenced, people came and they said, yes, Orlando, let's celebrate, man. You stole your career. You almost destroyed your family. Come on, let's go out and celebrate. And I said, no. We can't celebrate that because the man going to prison is a father just like I am. We're not going to celebrate that. What I will do is, if I was asked to ride my bicycle up to Camp Manitou, if this conversation is going to make a difference in one life, I would start riding my bike. Because it's not about us as individuals, it's about us as a collective. So I encourage you to, read books, watch movies, audiobooks, listen to audiobooks, things that will give you a greater perspective so that you could understand better. So, when you read or when you're talking to people or even interacting with a yearning to understand, not to know. I don't want you to pick up a book and be like, yeah, I read that already. I'm good now. It's not about what we know, but it's about what we do with what we know. It's about the actions that we take, right? Knowledge is awesome, but applied knowledge is infinitely more powerful. So and that's what we're talking about. How can we learn so that we can apply what we've learned to make a difference, not just for us, but for generations to come? That is the goal. That's the objective, right? Making a difference so that Camp Manitou is never the same. So that the spaces when we come together, we get that, when we get our heads together, we get in that space again where we could lock arms and celebrate and be energized by one another, and then go back to our communities, go back to our high schools, go back to our places of business and do something that makes a difference. Not just talk about it. The time is now. I encourage you to continue to reflect on what's possible. So if you find yourself in a space where you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe you're reflecting on times where, maybe I should have said something in that moment. I'm going to encourage you to feel whatever you feel, if you feel something, if you feel moved. But don't stay in a sad place. One of the things I see nowadays is folks are like, well, I want to say something, but I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want people to be mad at me, so I'm just gonna stay over here and just, be, quiet. There's no time to be quiet. Now's not a time to be quiet. Even if all you're going to say is, I feel something in my soul, like something's not right and I feel like I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. Even if you say that, that will allow those who have felt alone or who feel alone right now to know that they're not alone. Do something. Say something. Right? If you're in a space where someone is cracking a joke that is inappropriate, whether it's, it's a racist joke or a sexist joke, call it out. Be like, no, I'm not cool with that. If I were at Camp Manitou with you guys and I heard something, I'd be like, hey, that's not how we do, family. We're better than that. I know, it's all good though, right? The first time. Then we have to have deeper conversation if that's warranted. Right? But just understand that we're all on our own journey, but that doesn't mean if you're calling someone to account, it's not because you have something against them, it's just because we are better than that. And if we expect better and create a culture and an expectation where we're just going to be better, then that's what we'll have. That's what we'll have access to. And allow that to become the norm. Allow better to be the norm in terms of how we show up for one another. One voice, one team. I don't think I've ever said, leaders of tomorrow or leaders for the future, because we need you right now. We need you to lead right now. And if I say leaders of tomorrow, if I consciously think of it and then verbalize that thought, that I feel that absolves myself and others around me of the responsibility to pour into you today and to equip you today so you can make a difference today. Because guess what? We need you. Yeah, he gets it. Today. We'll need you tomorrow too, but we need you today. We gotta go, man. There are lives on the line. There are people counting on us to step into what's possible and to shift what's become the norm so that it's not the norm years from now. I was with a colleague of mine, and my nickname is Bo. He says, you know what, Bo? My parents and grandparents marched 60 years ago, and here we are. Folks are marching right now. Are you going to tell me that 60 years from now, our kids and grandkids are going to be marching? I remember a young person stand up and say, heck no! It stops here. But the efforts that it's going to take in order for it to stop, the efforts it's going to take in order to undo generations of systemic racism, generational trauma, generational hate, is not going to be one march. It's not going to be one book. It's not going to be one movie. It's not going to be one conversation. It's going to take effort. It's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard, but it is necessary if we're committed to moving the needle on what's possible. Respond in a way that closes the gap between us and them, right? Because when there's a us and we draw a line in the sand and say that's them over there, guess what? We all lose. There's no us and them, there's only us. So I encourage you to pour out, do what you can. Be uncomfortable. Try to connect with people, learn about their culture, learn about their food, learn about their history, and question things that don't make sense to you. Be educated consumers of the media. Don't just sit there and be like, oh, this is crazy. I can't believe that happened. This happened. That happened. They're saying this. Understand that there's sometimes things that are said or portrayed in media that are designed to have a certain impact. So be mindful and protect what you're taking in too, right? If you have folks around you that are racist, or you have folks around you that just have a strong dislike for people that don't look like you, you've got work to do. Perhaps some difficult conversations to have, especially if it doesn't sit well with you. Don't be willing to walk past something or to just bypass something and think, well, at least I didn't say it, I'm not the one. If you were present, you have a responsibility. Some people say, well, are you looking for allies? I'm not looking for any allies. Allies will be in a space and look at something and say, oh, I wish that wasn't happening. That's not right. I'm not looking for allies. I'm looking for folks like, that will be on a team saying, not on my watch. It's been an honor and a privilege to have this time. I appreciate you guys. What I appreciate even more is what you're going to do because we had this conversation. We can't get through this game of life on our own, family. It needs and it takes all of us to do all that we can with all that we have, because what we have is enough. Stay blessed. Look forward to seeing you in person. Mwah! Hugs and kisses until we can actually do that, or at least the hugs part, in real life. All right? High fives too. One voice, one, take!
Orlando, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us tonight. Your enthusiasm for life is truly contagious. To take such a traumatic life experience and turn it into something to really inspire the world where so many others wouldn't have had that same strength to forgive, it's really the kind of bravery that we need more of in this world. You're truly committed to living by your family's motto of raise the bar, raise the floor. It's absolutely amazing, and thank you. We now have a very special rendition of our camp poem by our amazing speakers, Orlando, Jama, Anthony, and Chika.
I am going to leave you with this amazing poem, the Camp Manitou Friday Night Fireside Closing. I know most of you know how it goes. I think it's amazing. So let me close with this. Live each day to the fullest. Get the most from each hour, each day, and each age of your life. Then you can look forward with confidence and back without regrets.
Be yourself, but be your best self. Dare to be different and to follow your own star. And don't be afraid to be happy. Enjoy what is beautiful. Love with all your heart and soul.
And believe that those who you love you. Forget that which you've done for your friends and remember what they have done for you. Disregard what the world owes you and concentrate on what you owe the world.
When you are faced with a decision, make that decision as wisely as possible. Then forget it. The moment of absolute certainty never arises. Blessed is the generation in which the old listen to the young, and double blessed is the generation in which the young listen to the old.
Thank you so much, Orlando, Jama, Anthony, and Chika, for taking the time to join in such a special tradition for us and reading those powerful words all together. Next, we have the talented Lizzie Moscow singing, and I hope you're all going to be joining her and singing at home too.
Hi everyone. Wish we could all be down at Fireside together, but there's only one way to end it, so everyone sing along. Deep in the heart of the north, there's a place where the world comes together, a place where the spirit of life still lives and holds us together. Oh, Manitou, oh, Manitou, for all our lives we'll remember you with songs of joy and friendships true. Oh, Manitou, we'll remember you. These friendships we pray never end, begin here and go on forever. So we gather together again to sing like sisters and brothers. Oh, Manitou, oh, Manitou, for all our lives we'll remember you with songs of joy and friendships true. Oh, Manitou, we'll remember you. Oh, Manitou, we'll remember you.
The speakers said it all.
Now it's up to us.
Go talk to your kids and friends and let's brainstorm on what we can do.
Please send any ideas you have to us at Manitou.
Thanks for caring. We miss you all.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks for coming.